John Knappenberger is President and CEO of the ANSI ASQ National Accreditation Board. Previously, he was Vice President, Quality and Administration at Dura Automotive Systems, Inc. of Rochester Hills, Michigan. He joined the company, which is a manufacturer of automotive systems and modules, in December 1995. Knappenberger is a former chairman of the boards of directors for the Registrar Accreditation Board and RABQSA International, which is now Exemplar Global. He's a member of the American Society for Quality Control and has served as president, treasurer, and chairman of the board of directors and as chairman of the Society's automotive division. John, take it away.
Thank you, Laura. And before I begin, I certainly want to thank both Scott Payton and Laura Smith for their efforts to get me involved in this Exemplar's Global Auditor Symposium. I think it's a very valuable method to communicate with auditors across the country and possibly even internationally around some pretty significant issues that are going on both this year and in the future. I want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about change. And you know, when you talk about change to people, they get uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Because typically people think of change as a negative. Now, when you think of change, there are only three possibilities. Things could get better, things could stay the same, or things could get worse. But people tend to gravitate toward change is bad. Change is going to hurt me. Change is difficult. And change can be good, and some change can be mandatory. And I would say to you that in this particular presentation, I'd like to talk about the changing face of standards and how they do change over time and what's important to an auditor and to an auditee. So let me begin by first demonstrating through a short graph or a short package here that in fact, the ANSI ASQ National Accreditation Board has two owners. They're technically called members, but they're owners. ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, and ASQ, the American Society for Quality. These two entities own our business. And it's proper that they do so because ANSI is the key U.S. body for standards. And ASQ is a body that not only helps people in the quality sciences, but also is a tag administrator, that is a technical group that actually works on ISO standards. And so we do one thing. That is, ANSI ASQ National Accreditation Board does one thing. We accredit the various people that you see on the slide. Anywhere from certification bodies to proficiency testers. And we do a little bit of training on our technical standards so people understand the standard. That's what we do. So that's the backdrop against which I'm going to be speaking because we have a significant role in using the standards. The standards are fundamental pieces of the way we do business. So if you take a look at standards in general, or the world in general, change is with us every step of the way. The first ISO 9001 standard was based on other standards that were out there, be they in the U.S., in Great Britain, or around the world. It was the first time in the 80s that they pulled all these standards together to come up with a management system standard. Now, that standard was in the late 80s. I believe it was 87 it came out. And since then, that standard has changed quite a bit to the 2015 version. The fact of the matter is, if you take a look at the cycle, much like nature, you go through a spring, summer, autumn, winter, and then it regenerates into something new. The fact is, no portion of life, not one single portion of life, doesn't exhibit change over time. It's a fundamental system that you can't escape but two ways. In a company, it's called going out of business, and it's a person, it's death, neither one of which is very palatable. So change does happen in all aspects of our lives. Now, the interesting part is it not only happens in nature and in people, but it changes in culture. If you take a look, and I use sort of opposite poles from my day, Fred and Wilma Flintstone, the prehistoric people in cartoons that were popular for a while. But if you think back, the early cavemen had a cultural piece. Now that's changed dramatically to business people of today. The cultures have changed. All you have to do is listen to music or listen to what was the culture in the 1900s versus the 2000s. The culture changes. You've got to keep up with that culture. You've got to change to be relevant to that culture. And so, change happens with people, change happens with culture. Now, the beauty of standards is the fact that standards in all forms are fundamental elements of society. They are the foundations on which we build our businesses, we build the way we operate today in the world. Everything has some form of standard to it. It is foundational. It is not the whole building. It is not the whole process, but it's a foundation. There are certain things that you must have in that foundation. Now, if you take a look at applying that elsewhere, in business and at home, standards matter. In homes, people will buy milk based on their taste, and they know what standard they have. I happen to have a lactose intolerant son. We had to buy soy milk. It was a standard we came to use because he had a problem. We had to adapt. It was a standard that we knew we could trust, and it was something he could live with and thrive by. And if you take a look at any number of things, whether it's glasses, shoes, clothing, they're all standards, whether it's size standards, whether it's type, whatever, there are standards everywhere. If you go to business, how in the world could you do anything if you didn't have some standards on which you could build a viable business process? And so wherever you go, at home or in business, there is a need for standards. My dad used to drive me nuts by using a standard that was his mantra, a place for everything and everything in its place. It was inevitable that when someone in my house looked for a pair of scissors, if they weren't put in a certain place, you couldn't find them, or Scotch tape, or any number of things. And so we live by that standard. Some published, some like that aren't published, but are cultural. They're things that we simply do because that we know is something that has become a standard operating method for us. Now, if you take a look at some of the simple things that came along that helped, now let's take product for an example. So if you take a look at the picture at the top, it is in fact Eli Whitney's cotton gin. Now, the cotton gin was developed in about 1793. Now, why was it developed? In the past, when they picked cotton, they had to separate the seeds from the fiber. And it was a laborious task to do that. But Eli Whitney developed the cotton gin. It was a standard process that sped up the separation process, made it more viable, more productive, and better. And consequently, he was the man who was the harbinger of the standardization. What he really gained his fame for was not this. This was not, in fact, a very financially lucrative thing, because people took the patent, which he had put together, and copied it and got around it. So others made it. So he didn't get there. But where he made his money was in standardization associated with selling muskets with interchangeable parts, rifles with interchangeable parts to the government. That's where he made his money. So from those humble beginnings to the sign that you see here, which is a metric symbol for speed. Now, when I was in business in the 70s, the U.S. was trying to go metric, and we got sort of halfway there. But if you think about that, I'd love to be able to ask you this question. When did that standard come into being? And why did it come into being? Where, when, and why was a metric standard developed? Well, in fact, I'll give you the answer. After the French Revolution, the Revolutionary Council was so upset that the serfs were being taken by the landlords because they were sold goods that were weighed on a method that each landlord had that the serf couldn't understand, and he or she was being taken. At least that was the impression. So they developed a system that was so simple. It was a 10-digit system, no different than the fingers and thumbs you have on two hands, and everyone got it. They could figure it out. That was done in 1899. Look at how long it's taken us to get to the point of using that. In many places in the U.S., you cannot get away from it. If you're buying distilled product like bourbon or whiskeys or gins, you can't buy it in the gallons anymore. It's all liters. Why? Because that standard is such that producers can produce it in one variety and sell it all over the world. Whereas you cannot buy in the U.S. a liter of gas. You're going to buy a gallon of gas or a gallon of milk. And so standards creep in where trade or where someone's damaged because they cannot figure out what to buy or how to judge the quality of one against the other. But the fact of the matter is, there are loads of standards out there that are driven by trade or by need and fundamentals that people and industries can use to their betterment. Now, if we take a look at standards, they, like individuals, go through a life cycle. Right now, the life cycle for 9001, 2015, is in its infancy stage. As a matter of fact, it's not until 2018 that those who are certified to the current 9001 standard must have transitioned. They'll go to adolescence at that point. They'll mature, and in some years, we will be going through another rendition or transition of the ISO 9001 standard. It is an inevitable as aging. You are going to have those standards change. Why? Because as they mature, we discover there are other elements that we need to incorporate in them. There are other things that are germane to business that aren't currently there. And there's some leading indicators that people want out there to demonstrate the foundation needs to be broader to support businesses as we have it. This particular rendition, that is a 2015, was built around making sure that not just manufacturers but also service components could use the standard equally as well. But the fact of the matter is, it will go through this cycle, and we'll be back again to deal with that in the form of developing another. Now, these standards have to produce two things. They have to produce value and competence. Value, that the basics are there. They're foundation pieces. They are there. And if you use them, you can be confident that the end result will in fact be something that you're looking to achieve. The fact of the matter is, these are the two key drivers for almost everything in business today. And value can be in the eyes of the customer who's willing to spend his or her money to use your product or service, and the confidence it brings to the marketplace and to the stakeholders and interested parties that you're delivering something to them that they can count on for value and confidence. But that's what the standard is all about. But the next step is you've got customers of the people who produce that, and those customers are cautious and reflective. They're almost like the Missouri state motto of show me. Show me that what you're producing and what you've done delivers what I expect and want. So they're cautious and reflective, and they will scrutinize the product or service, and they'll reflect on how well you've produced it. And if that foundation piece isn't in place, and how you build that to make sure the service delivered or the product delivered satisfies these people, you'll lose a customer. You'll lose the business. You'll lose your business. So it's very important that the value and confidence that you're building into the system is transferred to customers. But by the same token, those customers talk to larger bodies of people, stakeholders. And those stakeholders are even more critical and will give you a fairly good or negative feedback if you aren't producing what they expect, either in service or in product. A classic case of that is just recently in the news, and by the time you see this, it will be old news, I'm sure, but United Airlines had a very, very bad incident on a plane of theirs, and it was transmitted throughout the world, and their stakeholders, not only their stockholders, not only their customers, but stakeholders were absolutely furious. And in 2 days, there was a huge storm of backlash, so much so that today in the Wall Street Journal and most papers, the CEO of United formally apologized for the way they treated that customer. It is stakeholders who will drive the wave that will affect business. So the foundation has to be put in place, the value and confidence built so that customers and stakeholders alike will, in fact, see your product or service positively in the community as a whole. Now I want to say this is sort of Pollyanna. It's about everyone who could see and say, well, we all understand that. But let's take another piece off that. And when we talk about the standard, the question really is, what matters? Is it conformance to the standard? Is it item by item verification or validation or certification that this business is living to the standard? Well, I think that's part of it. But the big focus is the following. Outcomes matter. Outcomes matter. It's the process doesn't always equal the outcomes. Meeting the requirements doesn't also always say that you're going to meet the outcomes. Doesn't always. It should, but there are other contributing factors. And in 2009, the International Accreditation Forum, that is the body over which we're governed, put out a document about outcomes matter. It's nothing more than a reiteration of what's stated in the standard. That the standard is geared and built in such a way as foundational so that companies can package it to deliver what their customers want in the form of products and service that yield value and confidence. So it's not just meeting a check sheet of elements or adhering to the methods laid out in the shall elements of the standard, but it's rather using that as the foundational piece to assure the outcomes that meet the customer requirements and build customer satisfaction among customers, stakeholders, and interested parties are in fact delivering what the system was focused on doing. And so if you take a look at that, let me give you a couple of simple analyses. So every year I have a physical. It's similar to going through an ISO 9000, either internal audit or certification audit, or a look at your company to see how you're measuring up. Now, I have a problem, and I'll admit it. The problem is that based on the current standard, I am 6 feet 4 inches tall. And for that, I should be 205 pounds by the standard. Now, when I began this process some years ago, I was 235 pounds. And my doctor said, you've got to get down to 205. And I said to the doctor, do you realize the last time I was at 205 was in high school? And his point to me was, it was very simple. John, I'm here to tell you, based on bona fide standards, where you should be if you want the best opportunity for a quality of life that will last you your entire lifetime with the least amount of disruptions to what you want to do. Now, you have a choice. You can either follow my instructions to manage your weight and to get exercise, or you can do it your way. I can't force you, much like ISO 9001 or any of the other management standards. They say you shall do this if you want this outcome. You can do it. But my problem is not understanding what I need to do. He's given me a very simple formula. The very simple formula is calories in have to be less than calories expended. Pretty simple. Hearing it's one thing. Doing it day in and day out and having the discipline to do it day in and day out, month in and month out, year in and year out. Tough to do. Tough to do. And I'll tell you, this management system, whether it's ISO 9001, any one of the management systems, it's got to be worked every day. You got to work out at it. How much you eat, how much you work out physically, how much you get. It's an art. It's an art that people in the quality business understand. It's not a one-time win. It is a workout, and you've got to work at it. Many people belong to health clubs. It's hard to go in there every day and do what's necessary to get the results you want. Remember, results matter. Belonging to the club, having the certificate on the wall is wonderful, but it's results that really matter. Now, if I take a look at medical devices as an example, and here's another standard that's significant, has its own set of requirements, but in the base document it says nothing more than what the ISO 9000 does. And I'm going to show you the wording that's in this standard and in 9001, and it's interesting because results do matter. If you read this, it simply says you've got to build your system, your quality management system, to make sure you meet customer requirements and the applicable regulatory requirements. Results matter. But most people don't read the scope document. Most people go to section 4, the requirements, and read on. As a matter of fact, in the new ISO 9001-2015, if you don't read ISO 9000, that is the base document, the definitions document, you will most likely miss the intent of the standard. You've got to read the entire standard. Look at it, study it, read it, but this is what you drive the standard on, not does a company or an entity simply check the box. Do we get it all? Do we, in fact, meet all the elements that if we do, we're good? It's not only meeting the elements, but to what end? To the end of meeting the requirements and, in this case, the applicable regulatory requirements. Now, if you take that a step further and you say, so what? I would say to you, this is a very simple concept, but it requires knowledge, skill, and most importantly, work. So let me give you another one that's very simple. And by the way, through the ages, people would tell you this is a very simple concept. You want to buy low, that is at a low price, and you want to sell high. Why? Because you'll make money. It's very simple. Everybody knows it. But you watch people, whether they sell houses, whatever they sell or whatever they buy. Trust me, it's a very simple concept. Hard to make it work for you. This is something that requires knowledge. That is, the ISO standards require knowledge and skill, but work. And why? It doesn't stay still. It continues to migrate, to move, to change, to evolve. And those people who are working in it and on it have to keep up with it. If you don't keep up with it, it'll pass you by, and your relevance to helping people will be lost or greatly diminished. So it is a critical deal. Now, I'll give you another example. There are some people who are very happy to hire a consultant who will come in and put together a management system for them, and they simply follow that management system, plug it in, and will get a certificate. I guarantee you they'll get a certificate. They can follow it. The problem is, as change happens, who keeps it up? Do you keep bringing that consultant back? It's almost like the difference between a Rembrandt and someone who takes a Rembrandt and then copies it and puts in a paint by number game. So the representation of the particular subject matter for the painting can be the same, the outline can be the same, and the color numbers, but the nuances are lost because you're simply plugging and playing. It's not the same kind of artistry, it's not the same kind of quality of work as the person who's trying to get the end results and readjusting and moving it to make the customer very satisfied with his or her product or service. It's a constant adjustment, constant change, they're constant variables. It is a very simple concept, but it requires knowledge, skill, and work. It's not a plug and play. It's not an easy subject, and yet everyone tries to simplify it and make it to its base denominator and say, I'll give you a book, I'll give you the formula, I'll show it. Won't work. It's very, very hands-on because it's trying to meet the end results, which are satisfying customers and meeting requirements. Now, if I take that a step further, I'm going to go to the sports arena again. I happen to live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and one of our sports teams is, in fact, the Green Bay Packers. I know it's about 100 miles north of us, but we still like those folks. Now, the Green Bay Packers won the Super Bowl several years ago. And by the way, with certainly the same coach and the same team, they couldn't do it a second year. They wanted it. There's no one on that team that didn't want to win the Super Bowl a second year. And whether you're in the World Series, by the way, it took the Cubs 108 years to win it. Will they automatically win again this year? The Chicago Cubs? I don't know. I think they want to. I think they still have the same team. It'll be interesting to see. Or the World Cup, or the Tour de France, or the PGA, or an Olympic person. I will tell you over and over, to win it once is a great feat. To win it twice is significant. To win it multiple times is daunting. It is tough to keep up with all the changes, all the permutations, but that's what everyone's going after. The win is about the Super Bowl. The win is about the World Series. The win is about the World Cup or the Tour de France or whatever. The pinnacle is to be the one that satisfies the customer or wins the division, wins the World Series, wins the Super Bowl. That's the key. But it's tough to do that year in, year out. And so the question that comes up over and over is, can I read this standard? Can I apply it? And will I win? Well, you can. And you get various degrees of wins. But you have to work at it. And as this change happens, as you see what you change in the process, do I get the desired results? Are people changing? Are materials changing? Are processes changing? And do we get the results? And is the customer happy with it? It's an ongoing deal. It's not a one-time event. It is, in fact, more difficult than people like to believe. But it's an ongoing thing. And the smarter you get at the standard or learning about the nuances of the standard, the better you apply them and the more you satisfy the customer. And in fact, what you're trying to do, in all honesty, day in and day out, is taking today's events, and I liken it to a Rubik's Cube. Everyone knows the goal is to get all colors on one side, and you've got to adjust the process constantly. You're given the thing, and you've got to work at it to get it to the point where it satisfies what you want. And whether it's business or individuals, whether it's my weight, and by the way, I've been at this 3 years. I'm happy to say I'm 215 pounds. You know what? To get this last 10 pounds is going to be difficult. I know it. Because I've taken all the easy stuff out of it. And if I want to get down, and I don't mean I could fast and I could get down to 205. I could. I'm at 215. I could get down. I could lose 10 pounds easily. Wrestlers do it all the time. Collegiate or high school, they do it all the time. But it's not just getting down. It's creating a lifestyle that continues me to be comfortable living at that level. And that's what this is all about. Anybody can ship a group of products. Anybody can have one service day that's good. How do you do it consistently? How do you build that makes it happen consistently? And it's more difficult as time goes on because the world changes. It's not a simple cotton gin. It's not that simple anymore. We've got complex methods, complex tools like cell phones or smartphones that do more and more for us every day. And we've got to learn that plus all the other stuff. It's a labor saver, yes, but it's a learning. You keep your mind active and going. It's a constant evolutionary change that's coming at you, and those who get on board and stay ahead and move forward are the ones who are going to be successful. You know, I go back to my automotive days, and I have to do this because I really appreciate it. It wasn't too many years ago. We didn't have a car. We had horses that pulled buggies, that pulled wagons, and we had 1 horsepower, or maybe 2, or maybe 5. Today we've got things like the Corvette that have well over 400 horsepower and are phenomenally complex machines and work very well. And you can put any car in there you want. The fact of the matter is we've come a long way very quickly, and that change is going to continue. I would speculate in 20 or 30 years that Corvette will be nothing more than a museum piece. The change is that rapid. The standards on which that's based are tremendous, and there'll be more as we go toward autonomous cars, as we go toward more and more artificial intelligence that protects us and makes us safe and moves the value and the competency or credibility of what we're doing further down the road. Now, this isn't happening in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or even in the U.S. This is happening around the world. I was shocked. I had an opportunity to be both in India and in Africa in the last few years. In Africa, living in dung huts, virtually every one of those individuals that I saw had a cell phone. They were communicating with a cell phone. In India, vast numbers of people with cell phones. The world is changing because information is changing. Things are happening so quickly around the world, and communication change is all over it. It is incredible. Go back to the basic elements of our society, and you say, in the early 1900s, we had simple roads. Today, we have a complex system of infrastructure that we build it, but now we have to not only maintain it, but use it well. And that's part of the standards game, and that's part of the world we live in. So if I haven't convinced you of anything, I'd like you to believe, I'd like to have convinced you that change is inevitable, and it's going to continue. So you don't have an option. Change is going to happen. And as I said earlier, 3 possibilities. 2 of 3 aren't bad. 1 is excellent. That is, change is positive. The other one, change is not positive. That's a problem. We got to work that. But the fact is, that's true. So what's the story? Where's all this going? Well, I think change will continue. And I suggest you folks in particular embrace it. I see so many people grousing about it. It's the same product that you're going to be using and selling in a little while. It's the same product we're going to build our livelihoods on. Why grouse about it? Why not embrace it and build on it? Why not focus those companies to get the results they want and need? Why is it we don't build the value in and talk to them about the scope and what it is? The results of your business matter. It's just not conforming. It's using it as a foundation to build. So I would say to you, it's very important. And so I would, if I were you, do what I continue to do and I advocate for. Look hard, look long, look deep, study, find ways that you can demonstrate you're ahead of the curve on the change knowledge and that you're applying the change for the benefit of society, businesses, customers, stakeholders, and interested parties. So look long and hard. Don't give this a fluff to say, oh, this isn't worth much. It's not much change. Use it to your benefit. Now, I'll go back a number of years, as a matter of fact, to 1985. In 1985, I was part of the automotive division of ASQ, at that time C. There was a control back then. I like ASQ better, but it was ASQ C. And the automotive division at that time was very, very frustrated. Why? Because every OEM, that is original equipment manufacturer, and back then there was primarily the big 3, although there were others, but it was Ford, GM, and Chrysler. Every one of them had its own requirements. And every one of them set in assessors, auditors to check you out. And they were all over the map. We at ASQC in the automotive division brought the head purchasing person of the 3 large automotive corporations together. And we said, why don't we use ISO 9001 plus industry requirements? And that spawned QS 9000 and now TS 16949. So the fact of the matter is the automotive division demonstrated that change could be positive in this world. By the way, in my life before the automotive division, the job before I moved into the automotive division, I was a carrier. And when ISO 9000 came along, I truly believed that it was nothing but a scheme in the European world to keep our trade out. I believe that. Now, I have to tell you today, looking back, I was absolutely wrong. Absolutely, positively wrong. I was fed a bill of goods, or I bought a bill of goods that I shouldn't have. I was absolutely wrong. I believe that standard was a lot of what we already had. Once I read it and understood it, it was, wow, I get it. But the guy who really helped us in that time frame was a guy named Deming, Doc Deming. And Dr. Edwards Deming came along, and he was part of a video or a TV show that was, if Japan can, why can't we? And it was a lightning rod for the industry. It said, why can they do it and why can't we? Why can they produce quality product and we can't? Why is it? And he had his points as to why. But the fact of the matter is he catalyzed, he crystallized, he helped us in the automotive business, at any rate, get our heads around this thing called standardization and building product that meet customer requirements that are valuable and build confidence. And it's taken a long time to get parity. It took a long time. And we're still working at that. But it did cause a major change. Now, if you step back and you say, okay, these standards are foundation pieces. They're frameworks. And I would say to you, they are frameworks. And they're, at best, the foundation and some loose frameworks. And the difference is customers are not getting a paint-by-number picture. They're getting some descriptive methodologies around what they shall be doing. But how they do it and how they customize it to meet their business needs is their particular bias, is their particular focus, is their particular method to satisfy their particular customers and have a place in the global marketplace, not just today, but tomorrow and days beyond. And those who simply build the framework and don't do anything more with it will be viewed that way. Long term, they will be viewed that way. And so, in my mind, customers can use those standards to put wind in the sails, or they can use the standards to demonstrate they aren't going anywhere. As a matter of fact, they're probably going under. So I would say to you very clearly, these standards are important, they change, and your role as people who are knowledgeable experts on these standards is to guide customers, guide businesses, guide entities to not just compliance with the elements of the standards, but focus on the business results that customers want and need so that they can build value and also credibility in the marketplace, and so customers will come back. So I would ask you to ponder something, and that is, my thinking is that you, as knowledgeable experts on this, your role is to lead. Now, leadership is not about, are you the general, the captain, or whatever. Leaders, in my mind, are those who inspire us, not tell us what to do, not hold a position of power or influence over us, but those of us, those people who inspire others to do their best. You know, I have a saying I keep using over and over because people always say I'm stressed out. And I'm going to give you a little phrase. It says, working hard on something we don't really care about is called stress. Being forced to work hard on something we don't really care about, that's stress. I give you that. But on the other hand, working hard for something we love, we believe in, it's cause-centric, we really trust it, that's called passion. And those people with passion inspire us because they bring something to the party that's not just doing the job, but there's some bigger purpose. And my take is the purpose you have is to inspire people on the value and credibility of the standard. That's the key. That's the focal point. And you, as leaders in the industry, as knowledgeable experts, as people who have been the course, seen how it works, you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to demonstrate that based on what you bring to the party, it's got to be customer-focused results. That's where the industry is headed. That's where business should be focused, not just pure compliance to the standard. So, in summary, I can't answer this question, only you can. I know where I am. I know what I believe in, and I know where I'm pushing and shoving and trying to inspire people. But the real key is, and the real question you have to ask yourself is, how do you see your role? Is it mere compliance to the standard, or can you demonstrate, can you inspire the businesses you work with to meet the customer requirements, to produce value and credibility in the marketplace? And if I've in any way stirred your interest and direction in that area, then it's been worth my while to be with you. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a great day.
This ends today's presentation. Thanks for attending.